And today, my subject is going to be the exodus of Westerners to Mexico. And it's funny because almost half of the room, perhaps, are Westerners that are in Mexico. So I think it's going to touch you personally as well, as it's doing for me. So here's the subject, but the question, it's actually a question: is there really an exodus in Mexico of Westerners? And what is an exodus exactly? You may have heard the term like biblical stories, or like perhaps in war zone, because what is an exodus really is really a really massive amount of people moves from one place to another. So it's not just some immigration, it's really if a big amount of the population moves to another place. So my question is there really a Westerner exodus to Mexico and Latin America? But I will concentrate more to the Mexican part. So first, let's start large, right? So in order to understand why some Westerners may move to Mexico and live here, you need to understand first the view of the world that, what is the view that the Mexican have, the world has about Mexico. And I can honestly say from my personal point of view, just 2-3 years ago, for me, Mexico was not much. It was only the beach, perhaps some movies about narcos and stuff like that. But I couldn't imagine, for example, that Mexico City is such a beautiful and gigantic city with wealth, with many people traveling there. So how exactly does the Westerner view the movie? So there's the classic movies where you're gonna see like an orange filter, right? I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
When they present Mexico with the Mexican with the sombrero, drinking with the mustache and everything. And then there's the beach. For example, in Canada, Quebec, people only think that Mexico is a beach, right? Cancun, Puerto Vallarta, that's it. Then there's the reality. So I'm not the best photographer, but 3 of those pictures were taken by me. And the reality is that Mexico has a wide variety of cultures, of natural wonders, of things to do, infinite things to do. I've been here 2 years, and I feel I have visited almost nothing of the country. And but most of the people don't know this. They don't know that the central part of Mexico is where the Mexican culture is happening, and most of the population resides. Then there's the bad press. Obviously, the narco movies series is really good, but it's presenting a point of view of Mexico that can be hurtful sometimes, because people associate Mexico with only narco traffic and the problems at the border. But you have to understand that everything is politicized when shown in Canada. So supposedly in Canada we have the best country in the world, and in some parts it is. But also they're gonna tell us how bad is the rest of the world to make us stay and pay taxes, right? So that's I think it's part of a wider strategy to keep their people and make bad press about the other countries. But in reality, we can see there's a lot of cities in Mexico, for example, Queretaro, that attracts foreign capital, that is safe. There's many things to do. It's developing good, except for the construction, but that's just part of development. So again, we see that the reality is not it's not the same as what is shown in the news. And I have a German story. You're gonna be happy about it. So when I was in Canada with my girlfriend, we went to a little village called Tadoussac. It's a little place to see whales. So for those people that like seeing whales, it's fun, but it's kind of boring. There's only like 1,000 people. And we met a German girl there. And she was like doing a tour of Canada, the US, some part of Europe. She took like a 1-year sabbatical. And we told her, hey, you should come to Mexico. And she was like, what? Are you crazy? I'm gonna get raped, I'm gonna get murdered, I'm gonna get robbed. She called her parents, should I go to Mexico? They said that you're crazy, maybe you can confirm that. But they had a really bad view about Mexico. And surprisingly, we convinced her to come. And by herself, she came to visit Mexico City, she came to our house, see Queretaro, and she absolutely fell in love with Mexico in general, just like I did, and Gustavo and Fran and Tristan, I guess, did too. So what are the facts? Mexico is huge. It has like over 25 cities with almost 1 million people, or almost, in every part of the country with different cultures, things to see. So that's the reality, but you cannot really imagine this in your Westerner head or Westerner type of thinking if you have never been here. If you have never set foot in Mexico, it's hard to imagine this. So now let's go down a little bit closer. What are the tourism facts? So we know there is a lot of tourism in Mexico. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of tourism in Mexico, and it's growing. And so let's see how that's evolved over the last year. So if you can see the 10 years chart, this is the number of thousands of arrivals per month arriving to Mexico. So you can see a clear uptrend on the 10 years chart. And I guess everybody can guess what is that drop. It's the COVID, there's many way to say it, but the COVID crisis, or the COVID pandemic, whatever you want to call it. We're not going to discuss that today. But Mexico was one of the first countries that was like, okay, this is, I think, a good opportunity to be open to the world. And it was almost one of the only country, if not the only, that was not asking anything, a test, a vaccine, or anything. So obviously, the people that still wanted to travel, or feeling that their liberties were persecuted in their home countries, such as Canada, Europe, or the US, where they grabbed the opportunity and they went to Mexico. I arrived first in Mexico right here, right? And right before 2021, and it was absolutely amazing. I felt like it was the first time I went south, saw the beach and everything. It was to Playa del Carmen, so don't judge me. But at that time, for me, it was paradise. And I think a lot of people never have been thinking about going to Mexico before, but just by the fact it was the only country open, they just went to feel free. So, also, tourism is coming back strong. It's stronger than before COVID, so it's actually better than the level in 2019. Cash is coming back, and it's mostly coming from the US and Canada. Obviously the US, because they're bigger and they have a short border, but Canada is also a big part of the tourism that come here. Again, that's just the flight arrivals. As you can see, the United States are dominating the market. Canada at 8%, Colombia surprisingly 4%, that's good. And all the others, right, Europeans and other parts of the world are only 15%. Then let's go down even further. Again, you need to remember, what is the question? Is there an exodus of Westerners coming to Mexico? And I believe in some parts, yes. So what are the COVID impacts that are kind of helping Mexico into making this a good country to immigrate as Westerner, to live, to start building your life? So that is a thing that I'm really happy about that happened with COVID, is the online working habits. I think most Westerners here probably have an online job, they don't necessarily work here. And I don't think it's a trend that's gonna be stopping anytime soon. People kind of take it for granted, especially in the tech scene. If you're a developer, you have a job where you work online, it's almost like it's people care about salary, and then they care if they can work from home, basically. And only in the US, it represents 55 million people that have the ability of working from home and that already have this possibility. So just imagine a fraction of those starts traveling and be digital nomads, and just a fraction of those choose Mexico to stay a little bit longer. That's a huge impact already. And that's a really interesting story. If you want to go see more in details, it's a McKinsey study. Again, McKinsey can be involved in some shady stuff too, but let's take the metric as it is. Again, there is the politics and culture. One of the reasons why I left Canada was because I was dissatisfied how my liberty and my rights were were treated, right? Because you were restricted to travel, you were restricted to certain services, and it was really frustrating for somebody like me. Most of the people, they just comply, but for me it was absolutely enraging me, and I was really mad at the world and becoming crazy until I came to Mexico, and I was like, okay, this is the solution. And to explain the line here, so this is again in the US, but I believe it's kind of the same patterns everywhere in the Western world, so that's why I'm using them as a base. So here you have the level of satisfaction in green, which represent the total satisfied, and it has been trending down since 20 years, but you can see a huge drop in 2020. Of course, it's not just COVID politics, but also all the weird political climate in the US that is making this. And the orange line is the very dissatisfied people, and it has been trending up and also jumped a lot, and it's at half of the population right now. And that's just like very dissatisfied people about the politics. And again, it's a Bitcoin meetup, so we could go really in depth just within that subject alone, but obviously everything has become really more expensive in the Western world. Even though the salaries are higher, it's really hard, for example, for young people to buy a house. Kind of the American dream of before, that you could work a simple job and have a family and pay for a car, it's kind of dead. So that's also a big factor nonetheless. So these three factors, money, political dissatisfaction, and the possibilities of working online and also having your money online with Bitcoin, makes it more efficient for people to travel and experiment the world. So the solution for people like me, Westerners that are dissatisfied with their country, is to move around, is to see where they're treated best, where they can have better benefits, better value for the money, and that in general is called geo-arbitrage. So a little bit like trading, you take something of value in one place and you sell it in another place for more. And in that case, the value of your time, your work, is worth more here. And obviously that compensates all the privileges that foreigners have here, so you have to be conscious of it. But nonetheless, it's becoming a thing, and I don't think it will stop. And it was amazing to meet all those people. While all the world was in lockdown, everybody had the same spirit. Everybody was like, I left Germany, I left Canada, I left Australia, it was just too crazy. I needed to breathe, I needed to see the world. And a lot of people still have that in mind. And why Mexico can benefit the most from this new phenomenon? Well, first of all, because it's really close to the US. They have really easy politics in regards of making people visit. So you basically come, how much you want to stay, 4 months, 3 months, 2 weeks, bam, bienvenidos, and you pass, right? So it's really easy for tourism, so you can see how is the country. That is really important. And then afterwards, it's really easy also to apply for residency. So I have the temporal residency. For those who don't know or may inquire about it, the process is pretty simple. It's not that expensive, a few thousands of pesos, and you only need to prove you're making more than a certain amount of money. I think it's $2,500 a month, and after that you just need an address, and bam, you have a card for a year. After that, you can renew that for 4 years and then obtain your permanent residency. And afterwards, if you want to get citizenship, it's not that hard either. So that's also really good for Mexico. The lower prices, good weather, and surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, but modern amenities. So Americans that are used to live in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, they can find the same benefits, the same gym, the same smoothies for $5 in Mexico City. So it almost like their quality of life doesn't change, if not increase, but they will pay less, and the same for housing and everything. The culture, the food, personally, that's what attracted me the most to Mexico. Love the culture here, the food, the entertainment options are just infinite, so that's also a great thing for a country to have, right? And obviously, I'm conscious of the problems with safety in Mexico. This is hard to it's hard to not talk about it, but for foreigners in general, if you're not involved with criminals, you should be fine. Especially if you have like normal, basic safety measures, right? And not walk alone at night, just regular stuff, and you should be fine. What are the sides of from the Mexican side? Well, capital, obviously, the visibility. I think the fact that people are talking about Mexico. I mean, part of you are here because we're also part of an interconnected network of people that talk, that want to make relationships for business, for friendship, for everything. So I think the visibility is really important. And just like banal story with the German friend, or my mom came here, right? It's a trickling effect. Once you love a country, you're going to invite your people, your friend. So it's like a butterfly effect. And in some regards, some people may not agree, but I said also the culture mix. So I believe since a lot of people are coming here, they're bringing perhaps some different manners of doing business from the US, from Europe. They want to open businesses here. I think this mix can create also opportunities and growth in general. There is also some negative effects. People are talking about, for example, in Mexico City, people are talking about gentrification. But I think that's like a really smart part of Mexican that get affected comparably to the larger benefits of the whole country. So, I mean, there's a cost for everything, right? We're all friends, right? So now I'm gonna go down even smaller, talking about the North American continent. I know that Mexican can feel offended if you think that Mexico is in South America. So I want to just make clear, I know Mexico is in North America. And just to have a little bit of statistics about digital nomadism, so the fact of being able to move online. So from those 55 million people that have the possibility of working online, already 17 millions of them are consider themselves as digital nomads, and that's absolutely crazy in my opinion. And obviously they don't just go to Mexico, they go to Thailand, they go to Africa, they go to Colombia, they go to Europe, they go everywhere. But just by the fact Mexico is closed, closer to families and just closer to the culture, I think a big part of those are making a stop at least in Mexico. And once you make a stop, you're going to consider maybe it's a good option to live here. So I'm not going to read the exactly percentages, but it's been growing, and especially since COVID, as you can see, like it's jumping every year, and I don't think it's going to stop. Especially that digital nomads are also promoting the digital nomad lifestyle. So there's new businesses forming around the same concept. So I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. So how about the Canadians and the American perspectives? So I've seen a lot of news about Canadians living in masses, Canada to other countries, and the US, the Mexico. But right now, I don't think the data is actually talking about an exodus. Yes, there is a trend of people showing quitting Canada, but it's not like 1 million people left Canada. I mean, there's no war, there's no famine, not something that will trigger a mass exodus from Canada, right? But I think there's still, as you can see, the numbers here represent the immigrants coming out of Canada per quarter, and it's been the highest. The Q4 has been the highest since the 1970s, so since 50 years. So I mean, it can be also an anecdote. Maybe the trend's not going to continue, but we need more data for that. Where are the Canadian states? So officially, there's about 12,000 permanent residents, Canadian permanent resident in Mexico, And the problem is that the consensus in Mexico is done every 5 years, every 10 years. So I think, again, we're missing some data to really see how much of Canadians have moved here. And where are they staying? They're staying all over the place, but in Jalisco, like in Lac Chapala, Oaxaca, Yucatan, Baja California Sur, and increasingly in La Ciudad, CDMX. How about the Americans? So Americans, it's a lot more. There's 1.6 million Americans living in Mexico right now. But you have to consider that in those 1.6 million people, there's the retirees, so like San Miguel de Allende, when you see old gringos, they're part of that, but it's not that big. There's the young professionals, the digital nomads that live more in the big city or on the beach. And but the actual biggest part of Mexican living in Mexico, Americans living in Mexico, are descendants from Mexicans that have immigrated to the US but are not now coming back. That's perhaps a phenomenon that Mexican can explain more. The children are coming back because they see the opportunities again. They don't want to live in the States. They don't like the culture. They prefer the thing here. But more precisely, we still have a good number in regards of the US citizen that received temporary resident visa in the first 9 months of 2022, and it had a 85% increase from 2009, so almost double. But the thing is, you have to know that almost all the digital nomads that are living here, and also a lot of residents, don't bother to do the procedure for to be a resident, and they just live on a tourist visa. So I think the real numbers are way higher than this, and the Mexican government is trying to slowly make those people, like integrate those people into the society to perhaps make them understand they should pay taxes, but it's still like pretty lenient, and it's easy to just come to Mexico for 6 months, come back, and so yeah. And just a personal observation I'm seeing more and more of these videos on YouTube, like why everyone is moving to Mexico City, and I know it's pretty personal, so the algorithm feeds me what I want to see, but still this is something that's kind of becoming mainstream on Twitter, on different groups where people encourage people to try Latin America and Mexico in general. Just so you know, on Nomad List, which is like a website where you can find a lot of information about everything you need in order to travel everywhere in the world, Mexico City is ranked fourth. People love Mexico City, and I don't blame them. So just a fun fact. And also, statistically, Mexico City in particular, but I think also a lot of Mexican cities in general are becoming safer. So here you have different trends of homicide rates in big cities in Latin America, and all of them are trending down. And you can see they're like really comparable to a lot of American cities, and some American cities like Philadelphia is like 3 times the murder rate than Mexico City. So I think the world view is changing about Mexico, and from what we're seeing, I think we're gonna see continuous growth of people coming here, trying out the nomad lifestyle. So there's not an exit yet, but I think there's potential. So my conclusions, too early to say, to call this an exodus, but there's definitely some trends that we can see, and they're not stopping. And Mexico government is not doing anything to stop it. Quite the contrary, they encourage it. For example, in Mexico City, they want to launch kind of a nomad visa program, where like they are attracting nomads. And the population in general, Mexicans are really welcoming. So far, when I say I live in Mexico, to new Mexican friends, they're all happy that I choose living here, and they want, they want to be my friend. Like they don't say go back to your country or something. They're not racist. But of course, in order to remain stable and the trend continues, the situation needs to stay the same or improve, right? So if the safety concerns are getting worse and worse, that may stop the flux of new people, but I don't think so. So conclusion, Exodus, not yet, but in the work, I want to be part of it. That's why we're building, for example, this kind of community where there's a mix of Mexican nationals, there's a mix of expats, and the goal is to actually create something new, right? Something that could only emerge from those new relationships, those new possibilities of life. So yeah, and I just wanted to recommend Gustavo Flores, my friend here, Substack. He recently started delving really deep into the history of Mexico, into the financial history, the monetary history. So you should check it out. We're trying to understand in the country we're living in, right? So yeah, that's it for today, and thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if there's a question, comment, or just open discussion. Huh? Hey. And our second guest is here. But if somebody has a comment.
¿Puede ser en español aunque contestes en inglés?
¿Pardon?
¿Puedo preguntar en español?
Sí, claro, entiendo todo.
Ok. ¿Cómo ves tú el Bitcoin como en otros primeros mundos en comparación a México? Sé que México no tiene nada, como eventos o lugares para pagar, pero por ejemplo allá sí te puedes tú mover como en El Salvador y puedes pagar tu Uber o tu comida con Bitcoin.
Again, in El Salvador, that's not that true. You cannot pay for everything, but I think the vision of Bitcoin and the usage of Bitcoin is different in Western countries compared to Mexico, just because we're not at the same level of wealth. So for example, in the US or Canada or in Europe, Bitcoin is seen as like a speculative asset. So the only reason really why you'll buy Bitcoin is to speculate on it, make money on it, trade with it. But in Mexico, people still, for example, have more beliefs in investing in real estate or land. And a really small percentage of the people just started investing in stocks with like the new applications. So I think for Mexico, it's not even ready for that kind of investment thesis for Mexico, for Bitcoin, sorry. But the way, I think that there's a lot of more usage in Mexico, for example, remittances or getting paid online with Bitcoin, more like the transaction side of it will need to be pushed here rather than the investment thesis of Bitcoin. But I guess that's also a personal view.
Gracias.
¿Por qué Querétaro en tu decisión y
because at some point I was started to have maletas and I needed to settle down. But no, it was a common decision with my girlfriend. We stayed a few months in San Miguel. No, come on. Just your decision or both? But we stayed a few weeks in Mexico City, we stayed in Playa del Carmen, we stayed in San Miguel, and I like the big city aspect. Obviously safety played a part, but also the proximity of being close to Mexico City. So if there's, I want to go somewhere by plane, it's kind of easy. It's fun, there's a lot of growth, so I think it's welcoming for foreigners as well. The opportunities.
¿Tú crees que Querétaro es un primer mundito?
Sí. Querétaro has 50, in the last 10 years, 50% of foreign investment coming to Mexico went directly to Querétaro. So that's why you see a lot of, for example, Korean barbecues, stuff like that. It's because there's people foreign companies, and they miss their food and they bring their mom too because they have like 10, 15 years long contracts. So they have to live here. They build their family here, everything. So I think it's growing and it's part of the first world, definitely.
So we used to have a phenomenon that we said that when the U.S. had a sneeze, that we would get pneumonia. And so every time there was a recession in the United States, we had it very hard in Mexico. But for the first time in our history, last year and this year, the U.S. has gone into recession and we have gotten growth.
And the pesos is really strong.
And the peso is extremely strong.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm pretty confident it's because of you guys. Because I mean, so before one of the first main driving force of the economy was oil, and then remittances from outside of Mexico.
Yeah.
So all of the Mexicans that went to work in the United States and sent money back.
Yeah.
I don't know how much money you guys are leaving down here, but I think it's a lot. I think the only real criticism besides gentrification that I've found that I think is kind of valid and solid is that this nomad life is not really leaving kind of tax to the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're not paying property tax. I mean, you're paying sales taxes. I mean, income tax. I believe it's stealing.
Yeah.
It shouldn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is important as you adopt a new culture. That one is you kind of respect it, and then the other is like just be a very kind of gratuitous gift.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's why it's important to get integrated, speak in Spanish, trying to because you also, if you decide to live here, you need to make your life here, right? So
and also haggle a little more.
Yeah.
Because the problem with gentrification is that you take things, you say, oh, it's so cheap.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, try to make it cheap or haggle. So it's like, oh no, it has to be a little cheap. Not just because you're an outsider, you should be paying more.
Yeah.
Because if not, what happens is that we all have to pay.
Yeah, that's true.
Haggle.
That's true. I've become good with that.
Yeah.
No, but because the first time I went to Mexico, it was in Playa del Carmen.
Yeah.
And then again, it's like you say one word and you're classified. But then I speak like 2-3 sentences in Spanish. It's like, okay, the prices are going down the way. But still not the Mexican prices, but it's funny. I mean, it's normal. You're gonna get the same in
but I know
Turkey.
It is a little extreme though. So I lived in Condesa in Mexico City for a lot of years, in the 80s. And when the Condesa was a dangerous place to stay at. And then, there was a lot of artists were able to go there and kind of live because it was really cheap, relatively cheap to live there. Rents were cheap. And then the restaurants started popping up.
Yeah.
And it started just going up. And every decade, everything was more expensive. Today, it's just crazy how expensive it is.
Yeah.
And it's mostly because of
But I mean, in Montreal and New York, everywhere there's gentrification. So it's like if your city is attractive and it's cool, it's fun to live. It's just, I mean, you can fight it, but
just haggle. Just try to pay less. We all do that. Maybe we can make it a little.
Yeah, but if you go to Condesa, buy your coffee, and they say like 100
no, I think
pesos,
it's
you
mostly
cannot
rents.
there.
I think it's mostly
rents.
rents.
Okay.
Yeah, rents is where it really gets crazy because that makes everything just go up, And it starts with rents. Oh yeah, you can't go to Starbucks and say, I'm gonna give you. Kick you out. No, and also for the people, the people that sell in the street. I mean, the people from the economy. I think it's mostly rents that you need to.
One thing that I like here in Queretaro and more central Mexico is that you don't necessarily feel like a tourist. People don't look at you and like, okay, I'm gonna charge him 4 times more just because he looks like an American or something. That's also one part I like here, because in Playa or in Puerto Vallarta, you're always gonna feel like I mean, I know here people know that I'm a foreigner, but they don't.
You can pass us in Mexico.
With few tequila, and I start talking Spanish. So we have a second guest. Ricardo is going to talk about mining. So, do you want to send the presentation? next time.